The glow of the evening skyline illuminated New York City, the skyscrapers standing tall and unshaken by the chaos unfolding thousands of miles away. On every screen in Times Square, on every news broadcast, the same images played over and over: Los Angeles engulfed in flames. Wildfires had once again brought the city to its knees, leaving families homeless and entire communities in ruin. The devastation was unimaginable, and the headlines seemed to grow grimmer by the hour. Barron Trump sat in the corner of his high-rise penthouse, his tall frame hunched over as he scrolled through his phone. At 18, he was no stranger to headlines and public scrutiny, but tonight the news wasn't about him. It was about the fires, the lives lost, and the disturbing trend that was dominating social media: celebrities hiring private firefighting crews to protect their mansions while the rest of the city burned. Video after video showed fleets of privately funded fire trucks stationed outside sprawling estates, spraying water over manicured lawns and pristine gates. Meanwhile, families like that of Daniel Cooper, a veteran whose story Barron had just watched on the news, were left to fend for themselves. Daniel had lost his home to the flames, and now, buried under medical debt and without insurance, he had nowhere to turn. Barron's grip tightened on his phone. The image of private fire crews prioritizing luxury over lives struck a nerve. It wasn't just the injustice of it. It was the blatant reminder of how the wealthy could shield themselves while others suffered. The thought made his stomach churn. He stood up abruptly and turned to the TV, where another segment played. This one showed a convoy of luxury SUVs pulling up to a celebrity's mansion as their private fire crew worked tirelessly to keep the flames at bay. The anchor cheerfully noted how these private teams were becoming a growing trend among the elite. Barron's jaw clenched. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath. "How is this okay?" The frustration inside him boiled over. He picked up his phone and made a call to his father. "Dad, we need to do something," Barron said, his voice steady but firm. "These people are hiring private crews to save their homes while veterans and families are losing everything. It's disgusting." Donald Trump's voice on the other end was calm, yet intrigued. "What exactly are you thinking, Barron?" Barron hesitated for only a moment before replying. "We have the resources. I want to fund real relief efforts, not for mansions, but for people like Daniel Cooper. And I want to make it public so everyone knows where we stand." Barron felt his frustration boiling over as he watched more reports flood in. Footage showed luxury mansions being doused with water from private fire trucks, their pristine gardens untouched by the flames. Meanwhile, families just a few streets away were helplessly watching their homes reduced to ash, their cries drowned out by the roar of the wildfire. "This is disgusting," Barron muttered, pacing the room. He turned the TV off, but the images refused to leave his mind. It wasn't just about the unfairness, it was about the principle. How could anyone justify protecting wealth over lives? Determined, Barron grabbed his phone and made a call. On the other end of the line was an old family friend, someone with deep connections to disaster relief organizations. "I need to know what it would take to get real help to the people who actually need it," Barron began, his voice sharp with urgency. "Not for celebrities and their gated mansions. I'm talking about the families who've lost everything." The voice on the other end hesitated. "That's a noble goal, Barron. But you know how this works. It's not cheap, and it's not easy. You'll need funding, resources, and a lot of public support." Barron didn't miss a beat. "Funding won't be an issue. I just need to know who can mobilize the fastest." He hung up moments later, his mind racing. He knew that taking action would draw criticism. Some would accuse him of trying to outshine his father. Others would call it a publicity stunt. But none of that mattered. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't going to sit idly by while the system failed those who needed help the most. Barron leaned against the window, staring at the city lights of Manhattan as he pieced his plan together. He needed to act fast. With a deep breath, he called his personal assistant, giving clear instructions. Reach out to every reputable disaster relief organization operating near Los Angeles, he said firmly. I want a detailed list of what they need: most supplies, manpower, transportation, anything. And make sure they understand this isn't for private estates. It's for families, shelters, and frontline firefighters. His assistant hesitated. Barron, are you sure? This could attract attention. Good, Barron replied, his voice steady. Let it. People need to see where the real priorities should be. Within hours, Barron was on a video call with leaders from 3 major disaster relief organizations. They outlined the grim reality: limited water supplies, exhausted firefighters, and countless families without shelter. One woman, a director for a local nonprofit, shared a particularly heartbreaking story. There's a community center on the outskirts of LA that's housing over 100 evacuees, she explained. They're running out of food and clean water, and the fire is less than a mile away. They've been calling for help, but with resources stretched so thin. She trailed off, the desperation in her voice lingering. Barron clenched his fists under the table, his expression unreadable. I'll cover it, he said finally. Whatever they need to keep those people safe, I'll make it happen. The next morning, Barron's plan was in motion. Trucks loaded with supplies were en route to evacuation centers, funded entirely by Barron's initiative. News of his actions began to spread, not through a press release, but through social media posts from grateful volunteers and evacuees. One video went viral. A firefighter, visibly exhausted and covered in soot, thanked Barron directly. This young man stepped up when no one else would, he said, standing in front of a newly delivered water tank. Because of him, we're able to keep fighting. How's the pace so far? Should we add more tension or focus on specific emotional moments, like a direct encounter between Barron and someone he's helping? By the next morning, Barron's plan was in full motion. Trucks loaded with supplies were dispatched to evacuation centers, funded entirely by Barron's personal initiative. News of his actions spread quickly, not through press releases, but through heartfelt posts from volunteers and evacuees. One video, in particular, went viral. A firefighter, his face streaked with soot and exhaustion evident in his voice, stood next to a newly delivered water tanker. This young man stepped up when no one else would, he said. Because of him, we're able to keep fighting. But Barron had no time to dwell on the recognition. Calls kept flooding in with urgent requests for help. A community center near Pasadena reported housing over 200 evacuees in a cramped building. A volunteer on the phone described the dire situation. We're running out of clean water, and the fire is getting closer. If we don't get help, we'll have to evacuate them again, but we have nowhere to take them. Barron felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I'll send more supplies, he assured the volunteer, quickly organizing another shipment. But deep down, he knew this wasn't enough. Simply sending aid wasn't a long-term solution. As the hours passed, Barron realized that he couldn't just respond to each new emergency with supplies. The fires were relentless, and the needs were too vast. He needed a bolder, more permanent solution. Something that would not only provide immediate relief, but also restore hope to the people who had lost everything. Late that evening, Barron stood by the window, the glittering lights of New York City below him. His phone buzzed with updates, reports of new fires, another evacuation, more desperate calls for help. The weight of it all felt overwhelming. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would shock everyone. He called his father. "Dad," Barron began, his voice steady but urgent, "I need your help." Donald Trump, caught off guard by his son's tone, asked, "What's going on, Barron?" "I'm not just sending supplies anymore," Barron said. "I want to organize a team, our own firefighting unit, private but free. They'll focus on helping the families and communities left behind by the public crews that have to prioritize the wealthiest areas. I want to make sure no one is forgotten." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Trump's voice came through, calm but curious. "That's ambitious. You're talking about a massive operation." "I know," Barron said firmly. "But we can do it. I've done the research. We have the resources, and I have the contacts to make it happen. I just need your support to get it off the ground." Trump chuckled softly. "I didn't think I'd be taking orders from my youngest son, but you've got my attention. Let's make it happen." The following morning, Barron's plan was already being set into motion. Phone calls were made, resources were mobilized, and within hours, a team of experts was assembled. Firefighting consultants, logistics specialists, and disaster relief coordinators joined forces under Barron's leadership. The operation was unprecedented, not just in scale, but in its mission. Unlike the private fire crews hired by the wealthy, Barron's team would prioritize the communities most in need: shelters, schools, and homes that had been left vulnerable. Barron insisted on full transparency. "I don't want this to look like just another PR stunt," he told his team during an early morning briefing. "We're here to make a difference, not headlines. The people on the ground need to know they're not forgotten." By midday, the first convoy of trucks and equipment departed from a staging area just outside Los Angeles. Social media buzzed with footage of the operation: water tankers, portable shelters, and supply trucks emblazoned with the name Hope Force, the name Barron had chosen for the initiative. Volunteers wore simple uniforms with the words "For the People" stitched across the back, a quiet yet powerful statement of the mission's purpose. Barron himself flew out to Los Angeles to oversee the operation. Dressed in a plain jacket and jeans, he joined the volunteers on the front lines. At one shelter, he met a single mother named Angela, who had been living in her car with her 2 children after their apartment burned down. "I didn't think anyone cared," Angela said, her voice trembling. "But seeing all this, seeing you here, it means more than I can say." Barron knelt down to speak to her children, handing them care packages filled with food, toys, and blankets. "We're going to make sure you're okay," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I promise." As the days went on, Hope Force gained momentum. The team worked tirelessly, extinguishing fires, delivering supplies, and setting up temporary housing. But the operation wasn't without its challenges. At one point, a major water delivery was delayed due to a logistical error, threatening the safety of an evacuation center. Barron personally stepped in, calling contacts, and even offering to cover the cost of a private helicopter to ensure the delivery made it on time. The turning point came when a group of local firefighters, initially skeptical of the private effort, publicly praised Hope Force. "This is what we need," one of them said during an interview. "Not just talk, but action. These people are saving lives." The operation was running smoothly, too smoothly, Barron thought. Something about it felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. And the storm came one evening in the form of a phone call from his logistics coordinator. "Barron, we've got a problem," the man said, his voice tense. "Some of the private firefighting crews are refusing to cooperate. They've blocked access to key roads near the wildfire zones, claiming exclusive rights to the area." Barron froze. "What? How can they do that?" "These are public roads. They've got contracts," the coordinator explained. "Contracts that technically give them authority in these zones. If we force our way in, it could lead to legal trouble. And they're threatening to call law enforcement if we don't back off." Barron's jaw tightened. The idea that resources were being monopolized while lives were at stake ignited a fire of his own. "Let them call the cops," he said, his voice steady. "We're not here to play politics. We're here to save people." But the conflict escalated. Within hours, videos began circulating online, showing Hope Force trucks parked along a blocked road, unable to move supplies into critical areas. Private fire crews were seen standing guard, their vehicles forming an impassable barricade. The headlines were brutal. Barron Trump's operation faces major setback, and elite crews clash over wildfire relief efforts. The backlash hit Barron hard, but he refused to give up. "If they won't let us in, we'll find another way," he told his team. He ordered helicopters to deliver supplies to the blocked areas and coordinated with local volunteers to bypass the roadblocks on foot. It was risky, but it worked. Supplies began to reach the evacuees again, and the gratitude of those helped made every effort worthwhile. Then came the twist Barron hadn't anticipated. Late one night, he received a call from Angela, the single mother he had helped earlier in the week. Her voice was shaking. "Barron, I just heard something. I don't know if it's true, but they're saying the water supply near one of the shelters might be contaminated. I'm scared for my kids." Barron felt a chill run down his spine. If this was true, the consequences could be catastrophic. He immediately mobilized his team to investigate, ordering water testing at all the affected shelters. The results were worse than he feared. Traces of toxic runoff from the fires had seeped into the supply. Barron's heart sank as the reports confirmed his worst fears. Toxic chemicals from the wildfire debris had contaminated the water supply near one of the largest evacuation centers, where over 300 people, including children, were seeking refuge. If the water wasn't replaced immediately, it could lead to a health disaster on top of the fires. He gathered his team for an emergency meeting, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of a monitor showing the latest test results. "This isn't just a logistical problem anymore," Barron said, his voice calm but commanding. "It's a race against time. If we don't act fast, people will get sick or worse." The team scrambled to find a solution. Large-scale water deliveries would take hours, and the blocked roads remained an issue. Helicopters could carry some supplies, but not nearly enough to meet the needs of hundreds of evacuees. Barron's mind raced as he weighed their options. Then an idea struck him. What about the private fire crews? He asked, earning confused looks from his team. "They've got water," he continued, his voice rising with urgency. "They're hoarding it to protect estates, but those estates aren't in immediate danger. We could negotiate with them, convince them to share their resources for the shelters." His logistics coordinator frowned. "You really think they'll listen? They've been blocking us at every turn." "They'll listen to me," Barron said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." The following morning, Barron showed up unannounced at the base of one of the largest private firefighting companies operating in the area. Dressed simply in jeans and a jacket, he walked past rows of shiny trucks and expensive equipment. The site manager, a burly man with a clipboard, looked up in surprise as Barron approached. "You're Barron Trump," the man said, half as a question, half as an observation. "That's right," Barron replied. "And I need your help." The manager raised an eyebrow. "We're under contract, kid. Can't just hand over supplies. You know how this works." Barron stepped closer, his tone unwavering. "Do you know what's happening at the evacuation center near Pasadena? Kids are drinking contaminated water because your trucks are parked outside a mansion that isn't even in danger. You can look the other way, or you can make the right call." The man hesitated, glancing at his team, who were clearly listening. "And what happens if we don't?" Barron's expression hardened. "Then everyone's going to know that your company let children suffer so you could protect a few rose gardens. Is that the reputation you want?" The silence stretched, tension thick in the air. Finally, the manager sighed and nodded. "All right, take what you need, but make it fast." The convoy of private fire trucks rolled into the evacuation center an hour later, their tanks filled to the brim. Volunteers cheered as fresh water was distributed, and the evacuees, many of whom hadn't had clean water in days, drank with relief. Social media erupted with videos of the moment, many praising Barron for his boldness and leadership. "Barron Trump saves the day," one tweet read, paired with a clip of him unloading supplies. Another headline followed shortly after. The youngest Trump proves actions speak louder than words. As the last of the water was distributed, Barron remained at the evacuation center, helping volunteers set up additional resources. He spoke with families, listened to their stories, and reassured them that more help was on the way. But even as the immediate crisis was resolved, Barron knew the fight was far from over. The wildfires continued to rage, and thousands of lives were still at risk. The media attention surrounding his actions grew exponentially. News outlets, social media influencers, and even celebrities began to take notice. A prominent journalist called him the unexpected face of compassion in a time of crisis. Barron didn't care about the praise. For him, it was never about recognition. But he realized the media frenzy could be leveraged to draw even more attention to the crisis. The next evening, Barron made an uncharacteristic move. He addressed the public directly. Standing in front of a makeshift podium at the evacuation center, with volunteers and families behind him, he spoke to the cameras. "I didn't come here to make headlines," he began, his voice steady and calm. "I came because it's the right thing to do. But the truth is, this isn't about me. This is about the thousands of people who've lost everything while the world watches. We can't just sit by and let them suffer." His words were shared across every platform, trending within hours. Inspired by his speech, donations to relief organizations surged, and volunteers from across the country offered their help. But Barron wasn't done. He announced a bold new initiative, the creation of a wildfire relief fund, supported by partnerships with tech companies, nonprofits, and private citizens. The next day brought an unexpected surprise. The manager of the private firefighting company, the same man who had reluctantly agreed to share his resources, approached Barron with a proposition. "Look, I'll admit I wasn't on board at first," the man said, scratching his head. "But seeing what you've done here, it's got me thinking, maybe we could work together. Use our crews to help protect people, not just properties." Barron shook the man's hand, sealing a partnership that would redefine the role of private fire crews in disaster relief. Months later, the ripple effect of Barron's actions was undeniable. The Wildfire Relief Fund had raised over $50 million, providing resources not only for victims, but also for long-term prevention measures. Evacuation centers were upgraded, firefighters received additional training, and new technologies were developed to predict and combat future wildfires. Barron's name became synonymous with action and leadership. In interviews, he often deflected attention from himself, redirecting it toward the volunteers, first responders, and families who had inspired him. "This isn't about being a hero," he said in one segment. "It's about doing what's right. Anyone can make a difference, you just have to choose to act." Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more impactful content. Your engagement helps us bring stories that matter to life. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Barron's place? Until next time, stay curious and inspired.